So today's topic is on research ethics. And in research ethics, since research ethics is a huge topic, so today we will be concentrating on these certain parameters of research ethics, which you can see over here written in black. So we can, of course, there are other ethics also, but today we will be seeing only these things. So these plagiarism, etc., whatever are written over here, so these can be clubbed into the subheading of research misconduct. So we are going to see some research misconducts which maybe the researcher is using accidentally or maybe he is doing intentionally and which must be avoided to get good results, which must be avoided. If it is not avoided, then the research or his research work or the researcher can be also blacklisted. So we don't want that kind of works. We don't want ourselves to be blacklisted. So let us see what are the various things. Before going to that, our whole and soul of a researcher, apart from getting his research done, is obviously publication. So publication is our one of the main important, our goal, our aim. Even we know that in PhD, according to the guidelines, we need to have publications. So these publications, they have got certain aspects. What are the various aspects towards before publication? First of all, it is us, the authors. Without this point, without this parameter, there won't be any publications. Now, authors are there. Now, these authors, whatever he has written, this must be sent to the journal. Without the journal, again, there won't be any publications. Now, when an author sends to journal, that does not mean that his work, his article will be published. That journal will then send that work to the reviewers. The reviewers will then review your work, then they will decide whether it is fit for publication or it is not. If it is fit for publication, then they might suggest you some points wherein you can more upgrade your edit your manuscript. Then they might send back to the author, and then the author will work on the comments and then again send to the journal. If it is again, if these three things are okay, if the authors are working according to the journal topics, journal aims, journal scopes, and if the reviewer sees that the work is according to the scope of the journal, according to the aim, according to the various research ethics, then it becomes fit for publication. So this is the primary thing. Now let us see what are the various research misconducts that a researcher might make. So the first one is plagiarism. Now I am sure most of you have heard about this plagiarism. You can just go through the definition over here, and in very short, in layman's language, what is plagiarism? Now plagiarism means that when a researcher, when someone is using what he is using, another person's thoughts, ideas, data, figure, research methods, etc. Now, if you can say that how these thoughts, about these thoughts, now any people can think anything. That does not mean that another people cannot think what Mr. X has thought. Mr. Y cannot think. Of course, he can think. But if Mr. X's thoughts, ideas, data, figure, etc., all these whatever written over here, it is in a published format. See this, that is why I have highlighted this in red. If it is in a published format, if it is a published work, if it is a published work, then that published work, if another research is using without properly citing his work, or even if he is citing his work, maybe he is citing, he is giving the quotation marks and everything, he is citing, but he is overusing, he is using everything in toto, he is using everything as it is, 100% he is using, then that is plagiarism. You will see more about plagiarism in the coming slides. Then we see fabrication. Now all of you have heard about this English word fabrication. Fabricate, when we say fabricate, that means what? When there is nothing, you make up something. That is fabrication. Maybe we have heard that people are fabricating stories. News channels are fabricating stories. That means when there is no news, when there is no nothing about that, then a person is making up data. So in research, fabrication means that when someone do not perform the required research, whatever required research is there, if a person does not practice, if a person does not have the required research, but because we know that in research, in social science particularly, we know that a research involves what? Various sampling, surveying, etc., etc. So supposing these required research, when someone, he does not perform the required research, but then he just makes up the data. Why does he want to make up the data? See in the second line, making up of the data or the results. He does that because maybe obviously he wants to publish his research. He somehow, that person wants to publish the research. Somehow that person wants to finish up his research. So that person may use this illegal things about research. What he will just make up the research, make up the data when actually he has not performed anything. Then comes falsification. Now, falsification has come from the word false. Then, what is false? Now, again, this is again related to the previous one. When suppose maybe when the researcher, he is giving false data. Now, how can he give false data? He can maybe false data by fabrication, or he may give false data. Maybe he is changing the data. Intentionally that is done. When he is changing the data, or he is changing, obviously when you change the data, then the result will also be changed. When he is changing the results, and obviously when the data is changed, results are changed, then there will be misleading conclusion. So that is a false conclusion, what it should happen and what it has happened, because of giving because of changing the data, or because of giving false data intentionally. So it gives false misleading conclusion. Now, again, why this is done? Why a researcher would want to give false data? Now, maybe the researcher, maybe like supposing the researcher already he has his conclusion. Now, when we do research, there is a set rule that we follow. What is it? We first study, we first select the study area, we have data, we get data through surveying, sampling, etc., etc. We get the data, we analyze the data. Based upon the analysis, we do discussions. We have various methodologies about of analysis of the data. Based upon that, we do certain discussions of whatever result has come. We do discussions, and based upon all these things, what we have, we have the conclusion. Now, maybe the researcher has already drawn up his conclusion. He already has his conclusion, maybe from some other from some other work. He already has his conclusion, and that conclusion does not represent his work. He already has some ready-made thing. So if whatever data he has, whatever analysis he has done, then maybe by doing that data, having that data, doing those analysis, maybe the conclusion that he has already he has, maybe that won't lead to that conclusion. So if that won't lead to his conclusion, that won't lead to the result, then what he has to do? He all has to go for fresh sampling, fresh surveying, fresh testing, etc. So the researcher might think that, my time will be wasted. Many researchers, he might think that my time will be wasted. Again, some other more years will be gone for my PhD. So he does what? He intentionally changes he manipulates. See what is written in the first line. He manipulates the research materials, equipments, etc. So he intentionally changes the research parameters. Now, when you intentionally change the research parameters, then obviously you will get false data. So that is falsification. Now, I will give you another example of these two, that is fabrication and falsification. Now, you people are in your PhD. You people are going to do your PhD. Suppose you are asked to make a research article. In your coursework, you are asked to make a research article based upon some field study. Now, in social science, we know that field study includes sampling and surveying. Now, maybe because we know that in PG, most of the universities, they have dissertation. Now, maybe in one of your PG, you did some kind of dissertation, and in that dissertation, you had a separate study area. So, and now you are having a fresh study area. Now you decide to replicate the same data, the same this thing, the results, etc., in the present study area, without actually performing the survey or the sampling, etc. So that is what? That is data fabrication. You have a separate study area, but still you are copy pasting, you are using some other results into your new study area. So that is you're fabricating the data, you're fabricating your research. Now a researcher, he goes a step ahead and he does what? He copy pastes the entire tables, the figures, etc. So that is what? That is plagiarism plus fabrication. So these three things, I hope it is clear. Then comes the inappropriate authorship. So we will again see about this inappropriate authorship in the coming slides. So in layman's, what you can see that when authorship is not perfectly, it is not appropriately assigned based on the author's contribution. Then let us see what is duplicate submission. Now, supposing an author, he decides to submit his research article in more than one journal simultaneously. Now, that is a very bad practice. You should not submit more than more than one journal, one same research article. So, supposing that person submits that thing. Sometimes what a researcher does is that he will just make some minor changes in the same article. He will make some minor changes, like for example, he will change the title of the research article. Main thing is same, but he will change the title of the research article, or maybe he will change the abstract a little bit. He will change the abstract and he will submit in multiple journals. So but the main thing, since it is the same, so that is considered as duplicate submission or multiple submission. So the next we see, that is what? Overlapping publication. Now what do we mean by overlapping publication? The previous one was what? Duplicate publication. Now in overlapping publication, you have a paper which has already been published somewhere, and you maybe publish the same thing in some other journal, or you use major part of your already published paper for your new publication. Now, if these research misconducts, if these are, you are actually caught doing that, then you will be banned from that journal, and not only from that journal, you might be banned in your field. So, a researcher should not go for all these things. Next, we have Salami publication. So, in this, what is done? It is the practice of slicing data from a large study. Now, what that is? For example, a researcher, he does a good amount of work, an exhaustive work, and then instead of using all the data, all the analysis of the data in a single publication, which he should have, because maybe that publication requires all these things, all the data and all the relevant analysis based upon the data. He should have published these things in one single publication. Just to increase his publication number, what he does is that he might use a part of the data or the part of the analysis in one publication, and maybe the other part in other publications, and this is just for the sake of publication numbers. That is a very dangerous work, that is slicing of data from a large study into multiple publications. Now again, I will give you an example of this. Supposing one of you, or supposing a person, he does a groundwater survey, groundwater level survey work. Now, based on the data of groundwater, whatever he has obtained the data, obviously based on that he will be making various tables. Maybe he will be making various maps based upon the data of the tables. He might make various pie charts, graphs, etc. And all these things, mind you, for the same study area. Now, instead of representing all this data, because these are from the same study period, same areas, same everything. So the researcher, he makes more than one similar paper, and then he uses, maybe he will use table in one paper, graph in the other. He will use pie chart in one paper, map in another paper. But then the study period and study area is all the same. So this is, he is representing parts of his main work in one and the parts of the same thing in the other. So the objective of the paper, the study area, the everything is the same. Data is also the same, but how you represent the analysis is different. So that is Salami publication. Then we have the undisclosed conflict of interest. All of us know what is an interest. Interest is a commitment or a goal, etc., etc. Now, in undisclosed conflict of interest, what happens? Generally, we see this in most of the journals. They ask us to submit if whether we have any conflict of interest. Again, conflict of interest regarding this, we will see in the next class, not in the upcoming slides, but in the next class we will see about this. But in general, what is conflict of interest? When we have more than one research interest in a single pursuit. Now, you might say that obviously we can have more than one interest. For example, for people who you are listening, for PhD aspirants, what are your interest in finishing the research? To get a degree, to get a good job, to get a promotion, etc. So there is more than one interest involved. But if these more than one interest are at loggerheads with each other, that is, if there are compromises has to be made regarding that, if the ultimate result is being compromised, then that is called conflict of interest. Again, we will discuss about this in the next class. Then we have problematic data presentation or analysis. Now, whatever data you have, you are analyzing it in a very improper way. You are not analyzing it in a correct way wherein it should be analyzed. Now, that is called problematic data presentation or analysis. Now, let us see what are the types of plagiarism. These are the most common types. I am not saying that there won't be any other types of plagiarism, but these are the most common types of plagiarism as you are seeing in the heading. So, and all these, whatever I am saying, this will be followed by examples so that you can understand it more better. Now, the first one is direct plagiarism. So, in a direct plagiarism, what that is a word to word copying. When person A or the researcher, and I have already said that plagiarism is only considered when that is a published work. A person thinks something does not mean that another person cannot think of the same thing. So, when it is a published work, published thought, etc., all these things were said before, and that published work, when someone else is directly copying that word to word, and without citing the work, without giving credit to the person whose work he is copy pasting. So that is direct plagiarism. And you can see in box over here written what are the actions, obviously disciplining action, including expulsion from the research field. Now, self-plagiarism. Now, supposing any one of you have already published some work. Now, in that work, you have more than one author. Now, you are using part of your already published work in your new paper. And this you are doing without involving all the authors. The other authors does not know. Maybe you made it with ABC, and in the new paper you are doing it with EFG persons. So ABC does not know that you are using their works in this new paper. So that is self-plagiarism. Then you have mosaic plagiarism. This is not exactly direct plagiarism where you copy word to word, but certain phrases, certain words are used. Again, it is used without using quotation marks, that is without citing. And then we have the accidental plagiarism. In the accidental plagiarism, the researcher, he does that accidentally, unintentionally he does. Maybe he cites the work, but maybe he cites it wrongly. He gives the credit to some other person. Maybe that is done accidentally, unintentionally. Maybe while paraphrasing, like to avoid plagiarism, what we do is that we paraphrase the entire whatever we are using. Because these days, even if you quote the words, even if you give quotation marks, even if you cite, then also it is taken as plagiarism these days. So what we do is that to avoid plagiarism, of course, we have to give cite the person's name. We just change, we paraphrase the entire thing. I hope you people know about paraphrasing. So we paraphrase the entire sentence so that the structure meaning is same, but the structure is different. But while paraphrasing, maybe we use certain words, same kinds of words. For example, if I am working on landslide susceptibility mapping, landslide susceptibility mapping, or flood susceptibility mapping. Now, over here, certain words like flood, susceptibility, mapping, thematic layers, these words will be same. You cannot change flood to some other word. You cannot change susceptibility to some other word. You cannot change landslide to other word. So unintentionally, we are using the same word. That is accidental plagiarism. Now I will give you certain examples, and the example that I am giving you, it is not a plagiarized work. It is from my own research article which has already been published. So I am not using any other person's work to give you the examples over here. Now, in one of my previous published works, you are seeing in black over here. These were the words, these were the sentences that I had used over there. And these are all my words, not taken from any other person. Now, since this has already been published, for example, some other author, he decides to use these same words. He is using from, see, there is no difference from owing to imbalance. There is no difference in the words. He has not changed anything. That person has also not given the primary author any credit. He has not cited the work. He has not given any reference. He has not given any quotation marks. He has not paraphrased it. Same thing he has given copy pasted. Now, this is an example of direct plagiarism. In the right side, you are seeing self plagiarism. Again, as you can see over here, calculated by the authors. That means in this work of mine, there are many other authors except me also. Other than me, there are other authors also. Now, if I use this table, which you can easily see that the data has been analyzed and calculated. Now, supposing if I want to give the same table in some other work, without consulting the authors who also worked with me in this paper. So although I am using my own work, published work, but still this will be taken as plagiarism, that is self-plagiarism. Then let us come with mosaic plagiarism. So in mosaic plagiarism, these are the original sentences. Now what I do is that I keep the structure same. See, I have not paraphrased it. It is very important to paraphrase. I have kept the structure same as it is, starting from owing, then it is imbalance. So what I have done is that I have used synonyms in between. So instead of different, I use a synonym unlike. Instead of varied problems, I use the words different difficulties, etc., etc. So I use synonyms. So parts of the words, certain words are non-plagiarized, certain words are fully plagiarized. The ones in red are fully plagiarized. So this is called mosaic plagiarism. Here also I have not given any quotation. I have not cited the work. I have not paraphrased it. So this is mosaic plagiarism, where all the words are not same, of course, but most of the works are same, which are in between we have changed the words, we have used the synonyms, and we have kept the structure as it is. So that is mosaic plagiarism. Then comes accidental plagiarism. I have given quotation marks. Quotation marks is okay. accidentally the author, instead of my name, the author maybe he gives some other name. Instead of it should have been my name. Generally, this is how we give reference: the surname et al. Why? Because there are more than one author, so we give et al. And comma, and then we give the year. This is how references are given. If it is only single author, then Biswas, comma, and then the year. So instead of this, instead of my surname, he gives any other name. So accidentally that person, maybe unintentionally he has done that. So that is accidental. Instead of 2020, he maybe gives 2021. So that is accidental plagiarism. So I hope the various types of plagiarism are clear to you. Now, how can you check whether your plagiarism is, whether your content is plagiarized or not? We have got two types of sources. One is open source and one is paid. So you can see I have given the hyperlinks for the open source plagiarism checkers. So these are pretty good. But if you want, if an author wants, because generally paids are much more better than the open source, and that is quite natural. Now in paid, these two, that is authenticate and turnitin, these are the best in the paid category. And generally the various journal houses, and that too the foreign journal houses, that is, I hope you have heard about publication houses like Springer, Elsevier, etc., etc. Those who have got high impact factor, which are indexed in Scopus, so they generally use authenticate and turnitin. This is original, or this can also be called as Urkund. First it was known as Urkund software. Now it is known as original software. This is also paid, but if most of the Indian universities have been given license of this free of cost, is that in original, over this one, generally they only search, the database is very limited. They generally only search between the various database in Shodhganga, etc. The database is very limited. But in these two, they have a very exhaustive and an extensive database. So that is why they are the best, as I said. Now, original or Urkund, for example, if you have 5% plagiarism has been detected here, but in Turnitin and Authenticate, you can be assured that your plagiarism will shoot up to 15%. So that is the amount of difference between these two types. But then again, Authenticate and Turnitin, these are very costly softwares. Now let me come to the inappropriate authorship. Now in inappropriate authorship, we have generally three types of authorships. The first one is called ghost authorship, second guest authorship, third is gift authorship. Now let us see what is a ghost authorship. Now here a person who has made a substantial contribution to the research or writing of the manuscript, but that person is not named as an author. He is not named as an author. So that is ghost authorship. The person does work, but he does not get acknowledgement of the work as an author. Now, many a times it can also happen that maybe a person has given some contribution, but that is very small, that is very minor, not a huge contribution. And maybe that is why he does not qualify to be set as an author. It doesn't qualify that person to be an author. But even then, you must acknowledge the person towards the end of the research article in a subsection called acknowledgement. Just before the reference, you need to have a subsection after your conclusion. In between conclusion and reference, there is a subparagraph, acknowledgement, another paragraph, conflict of interest. So in the acknowledgement, you must at least acknowledge the person. That's you are thankful to so and so, or you are thankful to the university or the institution, etc., etc. So you must acknowledge the person somewhere as an author or as in the acknowledgement section. Don't forget that author altogether. Then we have the guest authorship. So in guest authorship, it is someone who is named as an author, but he did not contribute in a meaningful way. towards any of the, whether to the design or the research or the analysis or the writing. So that means a person who has not done anything, any work in towards the research article, you are giving that person's name. Now, generally, this is done when supposing that person whose name is being included, maybe that person is a well-known professor, he is a well-known academician. So maybe the researcher gives the name of that person, that well-known academician. Maybe that person is a academician in his field of interest. So sometimes why this is done, maybe the author thinks that by adding the name, if you give Mr. X's name, then since Mr. X is very well known in geography, maybe that person does not even know that you have written this paper, etc. But if you give his name, maybe the publication house will give more weightage when they will see, there is Mr. X's paper, so we must publish his paper. So generally that is done. Or maybe that person, he knows very well, okay, you are giving his name. He knows very well he has not contributed anything. But maybe that person is in the editorial board and he will help you in publishing the paper. So in that way also, the guest authorship is done. Of course, this is a very wrong process. Then we have the gift authorship. See, gift authorship and guest authorship is almost the same, because in gift authorship also, the author, he does not contribute in a really meaningful way. So both of this is same, but in a gift authorship, this is done maybe to reward someone. You are trying to reward someone or to return a favor. You are trying to do this. Again, I will give you an example. Maybe Mr. X, maybe Mr. S has put the name of Mr. Y in his paper. Now, Mr. Y did not do anything, and neither is Mr. Y is a very renowned person in the field of geography. Since we are from geography, I am giving you the example of geography. You can take any example. So maybe Mr. Y has not done anything in the paper, and neither he is a very renowned person in the field of geography. But still he gives. Why will Mr. X give? Maybe Mr. Y has done the same thing in his paper. He has given the name of Mr. X. So to return the favor, Mr. X decides, okay, then let me give the name of Mr. Y also in my paper. So that is gift. The authorship is gifted. You are not earning your authorship. You are gifting the authorship. So these are the various types of research misconduct.